Of course.
qualified and I can serve. Okay.
Definitely.
Thank you very much.
Morning, good morning. Got your message. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
First of all, today is a special day. It's Tif'eres Shabbat Tif'eres.
Sorry.
Tif'eres Shabbat Tif'eres. The days of Sfira, we start with Chesed Shabbat Chesed. We work our way down to Malchus Shabbat Malchus. And this week we're working on Sfiras Tif'eres. So the first day of Chodesh was Chesed Shabbat Tif'eres. The second day of Chodesh was Gvura Shabbat Tif'eres. And today is Tif'eres Shabbat Tif'eres. Tif'eres means beauty, the amalgamation of all the Sfiras together. And Tif'eres Shabbat Tif'eres is beauty within beauty. Generally, when you have one color, no matter which color it is, you can't say that it's truly beautiful. When you have an amalgamation of various colors together, that brings beauty. So Chesed and Gvura are two opposites. Tif'eres is the amalgamation of the opposites as they come together and fuse together as one. So that's why Tif'eres means beauty. And in Ruchnius, in Avodas Hashem, there's times when it's required to take the Chesed approach, there's time when it's required to take the Gvura approach, and sometimes you have to know how to make a good fusion between the two. And that's Tif'eres, and this is within Tif'eres itself, Tif'eres Shabbat Tif'eres. The Rebbe Maharash, the fourth Rebbe of Chabad, was born on the 2nd of Iyar, Tif'eres Shabbat Tif'eres. And it's brought in today's Hayom Yom that when he was a child in Cheder, so the Tzemach Tzedek once tested him. He was the youngest son of the Tzemach Tzedek. He was the Ben Skunim of the Tzemach Tzedek. The Tzemach Tzedek had 7 sons. The Rebbe Marash was the youngest of the 7, which is a very interesting thing in itself. That Tzemach Tzedek specifically chose him to be his successor. Out of the 7 sons, he chose the youngest of the 7, the Rebbe Marash, to be his successor. And welcome back. And when the Tzemach Tzedek tested the Rebbe Marash in the presence of his Malamed, and he did very well, so the Malamed got very excited, and he said to the Tzemach Tzedek, "What do you say? He's doing so incredibly well." So the Tzemach Tzedek said, "It's no surprise that Tif'eres Shabbat Tif'eres does well. Being that he was born on Beis Iyar, Tif'eres Shabbat Tif'eres, it's not a surprise that he's doing well." So Tif'eres Shabbat Tif'eres is a very special day. And it's being that it's the birthday of a Nasi b'Yisrael, and we know that a birthday is a day when one's mazel is goiver, is strengthened, and when a Nasi who has a neshama klolis that includes the entire Klal Yisrael, and it's his birthday, it's strengthening for all of Klal Yisrael. The Frierdiker Rebbe, who was the grandson and successor of the Rebbe Marash, successor meaning his father, the Rebbe Rashab was the successor, and then the Frierdiker Rebbe was his father's successor. So the Frierdiker Rebbe said in the name of the Rebbe Marash that the Welt sagt, people normally say, as mekenish darunter geht man arriba, that if you can't manage to go underneath the problem, then you jump over the problem. And I say, said the Rebbe Marash, instead of trying to go underneath, and if it doesn't work underneath, then go over, I say from the onset you should go over. In other words, take a broad, optimistic attitude of going above and beyond from the onset. And this can have many meanings in many areas of life. As far as Avodas Hashem is concerned, which is what mainly concerns us, is you have, let's say, for example, giving tzedakah. So you have a situation where somebody will come to me and will pressure me to give tzedakah. I'm not going to be a miser. I'll give what he's asking. That's dealing with the problem regular way. Chatchila riber means I'm not going to wait for the person to come and ask me. I'm going to take the initiative and go search out the person that needs the help. and provide them with the help. Somebody will phone me and say, I'm going to a shiur. Do you want to come along with me? I'm not going to be in action and say, no, I don't want to come. I'll go along with them. That's the normal, that's the runter way. A river means you take the initiative and you reach out to the other person to bring them to a shiur. Why should you wait until they schlep you? The same in every area of taking the chatchila river to begin right from the onset on the over approach rather than the b'diavad approach.
Everybody
It's something we have to work on ourselves. Anyway, so we're in the month of Iyar now. Yesterday and the day before we're Shchedish. Today we're in the second of Iyar. So at first glance, you think to yourself, the month of Nisan, that's an incredible month. That's a month of miracles. Iyar, you're ready to say Tachnun again, and it's already getting back to the grind of regular life. But the way Chassidus explains the significance of the month of Iyar gives it a beautiful perspective. That is that the month of Iyar is referred to in the Torah as the Chodesh Hasheni, the second month. And in Parshas Bamidbar, when it says that Hashem spoke to Moshe and told him to count the Jewish people, it says, "Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe be'echad lachodesh Hasheni l'shana Hashenis l'tzeis b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim." He spoke to him on the first day of the second month of the second year of the Exodus from Egypt. So the impression is, what does it mean, the second year of the Exodus from Egypt? That the second month of the Exodus from Egypt, that the Exodus from Egypt took place in the month of Nisan. And since Iyar is the second month counting from Nisan, therefore it's called the second month from Yetzias Mitzrayim. However, the Alter Rebbe in the Likutei Torah takes it a step further, and he says the second month of Yetzias Mitzrayim implies that Yetzias Mitzrayim has two stages. There's the first stage of Yetzias Mitzrayim, that's the Chodesh HaRishon, and the second stage of Yetzias Mitzrayim is the Chodesh HaSheni, the second month of Yetzias Mitzrayim. What does that mean that Yetzias Mitzrayim has two stages? So it's a concept that I think we've touched on on various occasions. It says in the Pasuk that Yidden escaped from Mitzrayim. He barach ha'am. Right, beginning of Parshas B'Shalach, it says that Paroi realized that the Yidden had escaped, and therefore he gathered together his nation, and he said, we have to chase after them and bring them back. They took all our valuables, they took all our possessions, they're gone, they're not coming back, and we have to chase after them, and that led to the Yams, P.S. Yams. So the question is, what does it mean Yidden escaped? Yidden didn't escape. Paroi gave the Jewish people clearly permission to leave. He said, Kumu tze'u mitech ami gam atem b'nei Yisrael. He came in the middle of the night to Moshe and Aaron, and he said, pick yourself up and go. So what does it mean that you didn't escape? So the simple answer is that the whole negotiation that took place between Moshe Rabbeinu and Paroi in requesting for permission for the Jewish people to leave Mitzrayim, the entire negotiation was only about going for 3 days. We're going to go a path of 3 days, a journey of 3 days in the desert. When we offer sacrifices to Hashem, and then we're coming back. Never did Moshe Rabbeinu request of Paroi to free the Jewish people for always, once and for always. The whole discussion was about going for 3 days. And then Paroi said, I'll let you go, but you have to leave your wives and children behind. And Moshe said, no, we're going to go. Everybody's going to go. And then he said, I'll let you go, but you will have to leave your cattle behind. We said, what do you mean we'll leave our cattle behind? You will also give us cattle because we'll have to bring a lot of karbanos. We don't know how many karbanos we'll have to bring. So besides, we'll take our cattle and our sheep. You'll also provide us with additional cattle and sheep. So again, Paroi chickened out, and he kept on saying, no, I'm not going to allow that to happen. Until it came Akas B'chayris, Paroi had no choice. Paroi himself was a B'chayr. He saw that the B'chayrim were dying, and he thought that he would be next. So he came in the middle of the night to Moshe and Aaron, and he said, Kumu tze'u mitech ami gam atem gam bnei Yisrael. Pick yourself up, leave from amongst my nation, you and all the children of Israel. Ulechu ivdu es Hashem, and go serve Hashem. Hidaberchem, as you have spoken. So all my conditions are off the table, no conditions, no strings attached. Go and serve Hashem as you have requested. What did you request? You requested 3 days. So it was clear that the permission that Paroi gave Yidden to leave was only for 3 days. And Rashi actually says that Paroi sent agents, spies, along with the Jewish people, and he told them that if it comes 3 days' time and you see that they're not turning around to come back, you should inform me. Come back and tell me. And that's exactly what happened. 3 days' time, the Yidden did not turn around to come back to Mitzrayim. So Paro's agents slipped away from the whole procession of the Jewish people marching in the desert, and went back to Paro, and they said, they duped you. They're not coming back. So when Paro understood that they escaped, they ran away. So he went to his nation and he said, look what happened. We had 600,000 slaves. They all did a runner on us. They took all our valuables with them. Let's chase after them. That's the story that led to Kriyas Yam. But the simple question is, why did it taka need to be that way? Since Paro on his own wasn't interested in letting the Jewish people go, not even for 1 day. The only reason he had to let them go is Hashem, with 10 makkos, forced him to let them go. And especially the final makkah, makkah b'chaydos, which was the straw that broke the camel's back. And Paro had no choice other than to go in the middle of the night to Moshe and Aaron and say, I'm desperate to get you out of here. Go, pick yourself up, take the entire Jewish people with you, take your cattle, take your sheep, take everything you want, and go. Yeah. So what would have happened if Moshe Rabbeinu would have said to Paro at that moment, Paro, okay, we'll accept your offer, but on one condition. We're not coming back. Did Paro have a choice? He had no choice. The only reason he was letting them go was because he felt absolutely, he had no choice. Whatever they asked for, he has to give. So Moshe Rabbeinu would have said to Paro at that point, we're going and we're not coming back. Paro surely would have agreed. So why didn't he? Why did it have to be in a way of an escape that Paro should chase after them? Who needed the whole business? So the Alter Rebbe and Tanya explains that everything in the physical realm is a reflection of the spiritual realm. Because spiritually, Yetzias Mitzrayim was an escape, therefore physically it also had to be an escape. What does it mean that spiritually Yetzias Mitzrayim was an escape? So there's the famous expression, it's one thing to take the Jewish people out of Egypt, and it's a whole other thing to take Egypt out of the Jewish people. In other words, there's two things. One thing is the Jewish people were physically in the land of Egypt, in a state of enslavement, and Moshe Rabbeinu took them out. Took them out. He marched them out of Mitzrayim, Le'enei kol Mitzrayim, b'yad Rama, in a uplifted hand. The entire Jewish people marched out of Mitzrayim. Nobody could stop them. Nobody could do it. But the question is, did the Mitzrayim go out of them? In other words, the Jewish people were spiritually sunken in the 49 portals of impurity of Mitzrayim. Their mindset was a Mitzrayim mindset. Their emotions, their desires, their passions, it was all affected by the impurity of Mitzrayim. So when they left Mitzrayim, they were running away from their inner self. They weren't at peace with leaving Mitzrayim. They were internally still on a Mitzrayim mindset. And because they were internally still on a Mitzrayim mindset, that's why every time something went wrong, the first thing they said is, let's go back to Mitzrayim. There we're comfortable. We fit there. So after the Jewish people left Mitzrayim, and now they had 49 days to prepare to receive the Torah, they had a big job to do. Because in order to receive the Torah, in order to have that experience of panim b'panim, diber Hashem imachem, and Hashem should speak to the Jewish people face to face, and anoichi Hashem alekecha, that the Eibishter's essence, anoichi misha anoichi, should become instilled in every single Jew individually. They needed a tremendous amount of self-transformation and self-refinement to be able to be fit to receive the Torah 50 days later from the Eibishter himself. Which is why they got to work immediately on a program of Sfiras HaEmer. Similar to what the Ram brings the Medrash, that the whole idea of Sfiras HaEmer, though it was only instructed the next year, but where does it come from originally? It comes from the fact that when the Jewish people left Egypt, they were told that in 50 days they're receiving the Torah at Sinai. And they counted the days to receive the Torah. But the counting of the days is not just counting the days. Counting the days means going through a program of self-refinement, self-transformation. Because the state at which the Jewish people were spiritually when they left Egypt would have been impossible for them to receive the Torah. So they had to undergo a process of self-transformation and self-refinement, a 50-day process, to work through the 7 midas, chesed through malchus, each midah as it's incorporated of 7, and to work through each emotion, each character trait of the Jewish people had to be refined and transformed to make them worthy of receiving the Torah. So it follows that the first month, which is the month of Nisan, is the month of escaping from Egypt, getting out of Egypt. But then comes the second process, which is the month of getting Egypt out of ourselves. And that is the month of Sfiras HaEimer. And the month of Iyar is very unique in the calendar. It's the only month in the Jewish calendar when every single day of the month we have a time-bound mitzvah, a mitzvah associated with the day, every single day of the month. The month of Tishrei is a month that's packed with Yom Tovim, packed with mitzvahs. But we don't have one mitzvah that goes straight through the whole month. For Rosh Hashanah, you blow shofar. On Sukkot, you sit in the sukkah, you mention Luban Esrog, but it's not one mitzvah that goes through every single day of the month. The only month of the year that we have one mitzvah, which is unique, a timely mitzvah, that goes through every single day of the month, is the month of Iyar. Every day of the month, we have the mitzvah of Sfiras HaEimer. True, we have Sfiras HaEimer in Nisan as well, but that's only the second half of Nisan. True, we have Sfiras HaEimer in Sivan as well, but that's only the first 5 days of Sivan. The only month in which every single day of the month is a mitzvah of Sfiras HaEimer is the month of Iyar. So the month of Iyar, the theme of the month of Iyar is the mitzvah of Sfiras HaEimer, the mitzvah of self-transformation and self-refinement, where it's not just about running away, it's about experiencing an internal self-transformation. And what this means on a simple level, let's say a person gets up in the morning and they're all excited about doing what they need to do to serve Hashem. Yeah, they get up in the morning and say, tremendous, Baruch Hashem, I woke up a Yid, I can daven, I can learn, I can give tzedakah, I can help with the Yidden, I can teach Torah, I can study Torah. It's incredible. And he gets on with the job. So then they're a wholesome person. Their actions and their enthusiasm and their character and everything is all on the same page. What happens if a person gets up in the morning and he says to himself, not again. This is not true. I'm not interested. Leave me alone. But on the other hand, I'm a Yid. I have a shulchan aruch. I have to do what the Eibishter tells me to do. So I'm submitting my will to yours. I'm not going to do what I want to do. I'm going to do what you want. And I'm going to do what I have to do. With a kracht, but I'm going to do it. Yeah. So then that person is escaping from himself. Right? Himself is his emotional self. Is not in a good place, but he's escaping from it. And he's getting on with it on a practical level. Very nice. We give him a lot of credit, but he's not a wholesome person. It's a split person. There's one half of him, which is his inner self, that's stuck in Mitzrayim, and the other half of him is running away from that. But when a person successfully refines himself and transforms himself to the point where it's not just about submitting your will to God's will, it's making your will in sync with God's will. What do you want? What you want is the same that Hashem wants. That's a person who successfully has achieved a self-refinement, a self-transformation, where godliness has become his inner self. So then there's no need to escape anymore. He's exactly where he needs to be on every level. So this is the transformation that takes place from Yetzias Mitzrayim until Matan Torah, and primarily in the month of Iyar. So the month of Iyar is the Chodesh Hasheni L'Tzeis B'nei Yisrael Me'eretz Mitzrayim. It's the second stage of Yetzias Mitzrayim. The first stage of Yetzias Mitzrayim that took place in the month of Nisan is escaping from Mitzrayim, getting out in practice. And the second stage is internally getting out of Mitzrayim, transforming yourself and refining yourself so that you are no longer a Mitzrayim person. Not just your actions are no longer Mitzrayim actions, but your being is no longer a Mitzrayim being. And that's a process which takes time, takes effort. And it's an entire event. This explains various things in connection with Sfiras HaOmer. The obvious thing is, we know that Sfiras HaOmer is a string between two poles. The two poles are, at the beginning you have the Omer, the measure of barley which was harvested on the second night of Pesach, and then offered in the Beis Hamikdash on the second day of Pesach. Right? And then we count from the Omer. Sfiras HaOmer means counting from the time when the measure of barley was offered in the Beis Hamikdash on the second day of Pesach. Today's the first day of the Omer, the second day of the Omer, the third day of the Omer. You're counting from when you brought the Omer in the Beis Hamikdash. Where you're counting to, what's the opposite pole in this process? The opposite pole is on Shavuos, we also bring an offering in the Beis Hamikdash, a meal offering in the Beis Hamikdash, and it is the Shtei Halechem, the two loaves, the Mincha Chadash al Hashem, the first offering brought in the Beis Hamikdash of the new harvest was the Shtei Halechem that was brought on Shavuos, and that now the difference between the Omer that was brought on the second day of Pesach and the Shtei Halechem that were brought on Shavuos, one of the major striking differences between them is that the Omer was barley and the Shtei Halechem were wheat. Barley is animal feed. Wheat is for human beings. In other words, when we start the process, we just come out of Mitzrayim, right? Second day of Pesach. We're behemoths. We're animals. We might have escaped from Mitzrayim, but our inner self is still a behemoth. What is a behemoth interested in? A behemoth is interested in grass. We are interested in sophisticated grass, maybe some sushi, some falafel, some pizza, some ice cream. But it's a behemoth, right? And then you go through a process of 7 weeks. Each day you work on yourself, you try to refine your character, and little by little, become a mensch, become a human being. And when you complete the task, you're ready to offer a carbon in the Beis Hamikdash, Shtei Halechem, which is wheat, which is human feed. Right? So that's the process of internal self-transformation, which is what the month of Iyar is all about. Of course.
When we start obviously counting the Omer, there's somewhere much later we came through the period where the Omer, where we can't do this, can't do that because of Rabbi Akiva. Surely, while we're strengthening ourselves forward, something in the back is going to get, but why am I bothered doing this? I can't do this, I can't do that.
Okay, so the question was, what's the connection between this aspect of the counting of the Omer that we're talking about over here and the aspect of the mourning which is associated with the days of the Omer? So, simply speaking, it's a totally unrelated concept. There are 33 days during the 7 weeks between Pesach and Shavuos when a terrible calamity befell the Jewish people, days of Rabbi Akiva. And 24,000 of the greatest sages of Israel perished in a plague. And therefore we mourn for those 24,000 students, and we learn from their mistakes, and that happens to be, those 33 days happen to be during the 7 weeks between Pesach and Shavuos. Nevertheless, I would say that being that what we learn from the students of Rabbi Akiva is, which their mistake was, they didn't show the proper respect for one another. So we learn from them, and this is the main purpose of that limited amount of mourning that we keep during the days of the Omer, is to learn from them how not to behave like that. And we should have respect for one another. Now, learning to have respect for one another is also part of improving our character. So there is a connection there. But simply speaking, it's two completely independent concepts. Okay, so coming back to what we were speaking about, which is the use of these 7 weeks to internally transform ourselves, so that we're no longer a behemoth who is impersonating a human being, who's getting on with the job of doing the right thing, but rather we become internally transformed to become a human being. And that's why at the conclusion of the 7 weeks of the Omer, we bring in the Beis Hamikdash the Shtei Halechem, which is made of wheat, representing achieving the state of a human being. There's another aspect to it, also very interesting. And that is that we know that on Pesach, we're extremely careful to stay away from chametz. Not to eat any chametz, not even to own any chametz. Right? Chametz is the worst thing in the world on Pesach. Then Pesach is over. And what happens when Pesach is over? It's okay to have chametz. If chametz was such a terrible thing, it represents the worst of the worst of the worst of what could be. So how does it suddenly become okay? And to make it, the strongest part of the question is, in the Beis Hamikdash, there's generally no chametz. The whole year the Beis Hamikdash was Pesach, with two exceptions. One exception was the carbon toida. There was a special offering, Thanksgiving offering, that was brought, and that offering was brought with 40 loaves, and of those 40 loaves, 30 were matzah, and 10 were chametz. So that was one exception. And that's the reason why on Erev Pesach, when it doesn't fall on Shabbos, like we did this. And on Chalameid Pesach, we don't say Mizmer L'Soida after Baruch Shama. Because Mizmer L'Soida commemorates the carbon toida that was brought in the Beis HaMikdash. And we can't bring a carbon toida when you can't have chametz. Therefore, there's no Mizmer L'Soida on Erev Pesach, and there's no Mizmer L'Soida on Chalameid Pesach. However, and there's another exception. What's the other exception? The other exception is the Shtei HaLechem that was brought on Shavuos, the two loaves that were brought on Shavuos. So even though every Shabbos they brought the Lechem Aponim, right? But the Lechem Aponim were matzah. Lechem Aponim were matzah.
Sorry, I've got a diagrammatic thing from the Mikvah, and it looked like that.
Yeah, but it wasn't leavened. It's a thick dough, but it's not leavened. Okay, now how do you make a dough like that without leavening it? This is a special recipe which was passed on from generation to generation by the people that prepared the Lechem Aponim, and there's a whole discussion. Were they right not to share the information? Were they wrong not to share the information? But the fact is that Lechem Aponim were not made from, where there was no leaven in the Lechem Aponim. Nor was there leaven in any of the menachos, any of the meal offerings that were offered in the Beis Hamikdash, except the 10 of the loaves that were offered with the carbon toida, and by Shavuos, when they brought the Shtei HaLechem, over there it says explicitly, we read this on the second day of Pesach, when it talks about the process of the Omer, and then the counting of the Omer, and then the Shtei HaLechem at the end, it says, Chametz te'afena. It must be baked into chametz, which is very puzzling. Chametz is a terrible thing. Chametz represents ego. Chametz represents doing whatever I please, right? I can spread myself all over the place, right? That's what chametz. Matzah represents being in control of yourself, disciplining yourself. Comes Shavuos, the day of Matan Torah, you would think we should come to the highest madrega. So what do we do on Shavuos? We bring a carbon to the Beis Hamikdash. Dafke chametz. Is chametz good or bad? Make up your mind. So the answer is, let's for a moment figure out what does matzah represent and what does chametz represent. Matzah represents self-discipline, right? If you take a dough and you let the dough do whatever it feels like, so the dough will rise. That's chametz, self-expression. Do whatever you feel like. That's chametz. What's matzah? Matzah is the opposite. Matzah is you take a dough, you don't let it do whatever it feels like. You roll it and you poke it and you quickly bake it and you make sure that it bakes into unleavened bread, and doesn't leaven. It doesn't do what it feels like. So chametz is self-expression. Matzah is self-discipline. How do we serve Hashem? Obviously with self-discipline, right? And do what Hashem tells you to do, not what you want. However, that's only at the beginning of the equation. When you start your process of serving Hashem, you have to ask yourself at every juncture, and what does Hashem want from me now? Don't ask yourself, what will you feel like doing now? Ask yourself, what does Hashem want from me now? I have to discipline myself for Hashem. I have to submit my will to the will of Hashem. However, once you're in the process of growth in Avodas Hashem, of self-refinement and self-transformation, then it's not enough to force yourself to do the right thing. You need to bring yourself to the point where your will is slowly becoming more in sync with Hashem's will. And it's become a point where if I stop you and I ask you, what would you like to do? The answer would be the same thing that Hashem wants me to do. I think that's great. That's what I would like to do. Right? So the process of 49 days of Sfira is supposed to take us from Pesach, where chametz is out of the question, because can I chametz? I have to do only what Hashem wants. Can't do what I want. And that's supposed to, little by little, take us to a place where, when I ask you, what do you feel like doing? It has to be exactly the same as what Hashem wants from you, because you've brought yourself around to being internally transformed. So your desires and your appreciation is identical to Hashem's desires and Hashem's appreciation. There's a Mishnah that says, "Batel ritzoin chamet nei ritzoinai." Nullify your will before Hashem's will, which means your will is to eat ice cream and pizza. Hashem wants you to serve Him, to learn Torah and do mitzvahs, and you're nullifying your will before Hashem's will, right? But there's another Mishnah that says, "Asei ritzoin cha ki ritzoinai." Make your will to be like His will. Get yourself to want what He wants. So when it comes to the beginning of the process, when it's still Pesach, you can get away with matzah. Say, okay, you want to know what I feel like? I'd rather not tell you. I'm going to eat matzah. I'm going to do what Hashem wants. I'm going to make myself subservient to the will of Hashem. And that's good enough for Pesach. But after you've spent 7 weeks counting the Eimer, and it comes Shavuos, then you're going to come with matzah? What have you been doing for the last 7 weeks if you're still eating matzah? Now it's time to have achieved a level of Avodas Hashem where your self-expression is holy, where your self-expression is connecting you with Hashem, where your internal self is one with Hashem. What do I want, and what am I excited about? What am I enthusiastic about? And how would I like to have it? Exactly as the Torah says. Because now I brought myself around to have an appreciation and a passion for the same thing that Torah has an appreciation and a passion. That's the conclusion of the process of Shvira Soil. That makes sense?
Yes and no. Because chametz represents bad side things. So can we
Let's clarify that. Chametz represents whatever you feel like. Right? What does the dough do? Let the dough do whatever it feels like, right? Yeah. So when you're at the beginning of the process, what you feel like is not where you should be. So therefore, the beginning of the process has to be by making subservient your will to Hashem's will, right? But you can't be satisfied with staying at that level. You have to work on growing and developing and transforming yourself and refining yourself to the point where your inner desires become in sync with Hashem's desires. And if you've completed that process successfully, which is what Shavuos is all about, you finished the entire Omer process. So now you should be holding at a level where your chametz is suitable for the Beis Hamikdash. Okay? Chametz is not bad. Chametz is, be honest with yourself, what do you feel like? And this also explains another thing. When you offer the Korban Pesach in the Beis Hamikdash, an Erev Pesach in the afternoon, so even though it's not yet Pesach, but we know that it's forbidden to have any chametz in your possession when you offer the Korban Pesach. Right? When you bring the Korban Pesach, you have to have gotten rid of all your chametz. Nevertheless, 2 weeks' time, we're going to have a Yom Tov called Pesach Sheni. The second Pesach. So a person didn't manage to bring a Korban Pesach for whatever reason on the first Pesach, on the Erev Pesach. Torah gives them another chance to do so on the 14th of Iyar. So by you bringing the Korban Pesach on the 14th of Iyar, do you have to get rid of all your chametz first? No. It says chametz u'matzah imei b'bayis. You eat the Korban Pesach together with matzah and mar, like you do if you would bring the Korban Pesach on the first Pesach. But you don't have to get rid of the chametz in your house. You can still have chametz in your house. So the question is, if chametz is so terrible that you can't have a Korban Pesach if you have chametz anywhere in your possession, then why in Pesach Sheni does it become okay to have chametz in your cupboard and eat matzah with the Korban Pesach? The answer is, Pesach Sheni is already good 3 weeks into the counting of the Eimer. So by the time you've reached that level of Pesach Sheni, the middle of the month of Iyar, which is the month of self-transformation, you should be on a level where your chametz is not so antithetical to the matzah which you are having with your Korban Pesach. They're not so far away from each other anymore. On Erev Pesach, when you're just ready to start, your chametz under. You don't want to go anywhere near that. But by the time you've been 3 weeks through the process of working on your midas one by one to transform them, then you should already be holding at a level where you can have chametz in the house, and you can have carbon pesach with matzah, and they're not so far from each other. They can coexist because you've already at least somewhat elevated your chametz that it's acceptable. When you get to the end of the line, a shvuas, not only is it acceptable, it's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah for the Beis Hamikdash. Because that level of chametz that you're holding by the end of the process of Shviras HaOmer is the ultimate. It's much higher madrega than the matzah that you had on Pesach. Because the matzah that you had on Pesach implied that you're not really there. You're just escaping from yourself. The chametz that you're having on Shvuas implies that you are there. Fully, every fiber of your being is with you. So the month of Iyar is a very special month. And that's one of the reasons why Iyar is a Rosh Tevis, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Rachel. Because the Avos and the Imahos, they weren't just doing Hashem a favor and making themselves subservient to the will of Hashem. They were passionate. Every fiber of their being was completely devoted and completely given over to Hashem. Any questions on what we spoke about till now?
So you talking about Ian, Rosh Hashanah. Interesting that Rach was not. Was a similar. She was a good.
So, according to Kabbalah, Rachel is Sfiras HaMalchus. So Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are Chet and Gvura Tiferes. Those are the first 3 midas. And then Malchus is the way everything comes down into practice. So the 4 legs of the divine chariot are Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Rachel. Okay.
So those are the 4 things to work on. You only count still. Where there's like wording.
Right. So there's 7 midas. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Yisoid, Malchus. And each day we work on one of those. And I mentioned at the beginning of the share that today is Tiferes, Shabbat Tiferes. Okay, we're going to move on to Tanya. Rebbe Marash's birthday. Yeah. We spoke about that at the beginning of the year. Sure.
The 33 days.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked, what if someone had to do from Pesach 33? Some do Rosh Chodesh, some do. Why is there no?
Okay, so the question was about the different customs about when the 33 days are. So interesting, today is the first day that brings tremendous achdus to Klal Yisrael. Everybody, no matter how you slice the pie, everybody agrees that from today onward, you're in the 33 days, right? So today begins the last 33 days of the Eidah. From today till Erev Shavuos is 33 days. So there's actually 3 opinions brought in Shulchan Aruch. One opinion is that the 33 days are the first 33 days of the Eidah. So it's from the beginning of Pesach until the second day of Pesach until Lag B'Omer. It's 33 days. And according to that opinion, from Lag B'Omer onward, there's no morning anymore. Then there's another opinion that says it's the last 33 days, which is you start from today, the second of the year, and you go until Erev Shavuos. And the reason why Erev Shavuos itself is permitted is because Miktsas Hayom Kekule, when it comes to matters of mourning, a partial day is like a whole day. That's why in Shvakenim Milach, if someone is sitting Shiva, the 7th day is only in the morning. Because Miktsas Hayom Kekule, a little bit of the day is like the whole day. Now, there is a middle option. That is that the 33 days are basically towards the end of the Omer, but they don't start today, the second of Iyar, rather they start the first day of Shiur, and they finish the first day of Shleishis Yemei Hagbal. So since we don't have there's no halacha, sometimes you have a machlokes, you have 2 opinions, and the halacha is like this. Here, the halacha has never been set one way or another. So every community keeps its custom. So there are those that have the custom to keep the first 33 days. There are those that have the custom to keep the last 33 days. And they're all valid. So every community can keep their custom. In Chabad, it's actually, we keep the entire Omer. Right. Perhaps this custom, perhaps that custom. There isn't. But I was invited to a wedding last week, and I was very happy to be there. They're accustomed to not keep that part of the Omer. I respect that, and I joined in their simcha. And I wouldn't make a simcha at that time. It's not our minute. And very soon Mashiach will be here, and all these matters will get sorted. Then we'll be able to rejoice every day of the year, not exception, including Tisha B'Av. Sure.
Rabbi told me that he's invited to a wedding. And if he looks it up, and says, join in the simcha, because you'll bring us in there, and we don't have to say let's come and then so if you're invited to the wedding, like I said, you can.
I figured that's a sensible approach. Okay, so we're in Tanya, we're in the middle of learning about the various manifestations of the negative attributes of the Nefesh HaBamis. Right, so we're on page 10, numbers on top of the page, which is page 4, numbers on the bottom of the page. Yeah, and we were learning about the Nefesh HaBamis, which is good to learn about because the whole purpose of having a Nefesh HaBamis, especially in the spirit of what we were talking about before, is to take the negative character traits and turn them over to positive character traits. So when the darkness is transformed into light, it becomes even a greater light than ordinary light. So it's important to know about the negative character traits of Nefesh HaBamis so you can turn them over and make the darkness into light. So last week we learned about Kaas and Gaiva, which come from Yesod HaEsh, from the element of fire. And now we're going to move on 2 lines from the bottom of the page. V'tavas hatanugim Yesod Haman. So the passion for delightful things, delightful food, kinds of delights, are from the element of water. We said there's 4 elements: fire, water, wind, and earth. So from fire, we said, came anger and haughtiness. From the element of water comes the desire for delightful things. And what's the connection to water? Because water is the cause for causing all delightful things to grow. Water causes irrigation. The water causes things to grow. And we see that, first of all, human society, civilization, always gravitates towards places of water. Normally, people don't establish a civilization. They don't establish a city in the middle of a desert. You establish a city where there's water. Where there's a river, where there's a sea, where there's a lake. Where there's water, you establish a city because human beings need water. Water causes all delightful things to grow. And also, when you enjoy something, often it's the juiciness within it that is enjoyable. So it's connected with the element of water. Then there's v'hoilalus, v'leitzonus, v'hispidus, v'dvarim b'teilu. Lightheadedness, scoffing, boasting, and idle talk. They come yesod haruach. They're from the element of wind. Even though you could argue that all these things are also delightful. So just like a person can have a desire for tasty food or for other delightful things, desirable things, you can have a desire to be lightheaded or for scoffing or for boasting or for idle talk. Nevertheless, there's a very basic difference between the two. That is, most attractive or desirable things in the world, we know that they're not respect. We know that they're nothing. But when the person is desiring them, he thinks that they're worthy of his desire. He thinks there's something significant that it's worth being passionate about. But there are certain things that the person, even when he's desiring them, he doesn't desire them because he thinks that there's something worth desiring. He knows that they're hollow and meaningless. But his enjoyment his desire is the meaninglessness of it, and the hollowness of it is what attracts him. He enjoys the emptiness. So when a person is lightheaded, people people are doing stupid things. They don't think that what they're saying is clever. They're enjoying the stupidity of it. So that comes from the element of wind. It's full of hareh. And the same thing is like scoffing. Some type of people, some people have this, whatever you talk about, they'll always poke fun at it. Not because they think it's not really meaningful, not because they think it's not important. It could be important, but they enjoy making everything meaningless. And similarly, hispidus, boasting. We spoke before about haughtiness. Now we're speaking, which is God. Now we're speaking about hispidus, boasting. What's the difference? The difference is very simple. A person can have certain positive qualities. Very clever. So if he focuses on, I'm such a clever person, that's haughtiness, right? Instead of saying, thank you, Hashem, for giving me wisdom, and I'm going to try to use it for a good purpose, and I'm indebted to you, Hashem, for the gift that you've given me, and I feel a responsibility to use it for the right things. Then he walks around and he says, hey, I'm brilliant. And that's what it is. Boasting is when a person is boastful about virtues that he knows he doesn't even have. Everything he's boasting about. Not because he thinks he really is God's gift to humanity. He likes to talk about himself. So he knows that it's full of harir. And that's what he enjoys. And the same thing is idle talk. Sometimes people have a conversation about something which they think is very important. We know that it's not important, but they think that it's important. Sometimes you have people enjoy discussing things which they know is absolutely meaningless. It means nothing. But they're enjoying the emptiness of it. So that all comes from the Yesod HaRuach, from the element of wind, of air. It's all full of honey. And then the fourth and final one, and the most dangerous one, is the atzlus, laziness and sadness are miyased ha'afar, come from the element of dust. Because just like dust, earth is heavy, and it drags you down. So these two character traits of laziness and sadness are totally unproductive. They just drag you down, make you useless. And that's one of the reasons why a person has to try and stay as far as possible from these midas. They say that Shlomo Karliner used to say, he said that atzvus, sadness, depression, is not an aveda. It doesn't say anywhere in the Torah that it's forbidden to be sad. Not an aveda. But the damage that it can cause a person, no aveda can cause. It's more destructive than any aveda. Because when a person is they're down, they can't get themselves together, that prevents them from all positive movement. So it's a terrible thing. That comes from within the Nefesh HaBamis itself. It comes from the Yesod HaAfar, from the element of earth. And as we mentioned in the previous Shiur, that the main problem of the Nefesh HaBamis is he's centered on himself. He's focused on himself. When a Yid is focused on the Eibishter, he's always besimcha. We have such an incredible Almighty. Of course we should be in a state of joy. We're so lucky. You, Hashem, chose us from all the nations. You lifted us up from all the tongues. You drew us near to serving you. You called your holy name upon us. Wow, it's incredible. This is the best thing in the world. But if a person is focused on himself, you're focused on yourself, you always find what to complain about. This isn't good enough for me. That isn't good enough for me. I'm depressed about this. I'm depressed about that. Forget about yourself. Get out of that. The Nefesh HaBamis is all about himself. Nefesh HaLokis is about this. Thank God there's a tremendous Almighty up there, and we have the privilege of serving. I remember it made such an impression on me. I was in Shul in Kingsley Way on a Shabbos many years ago, and there was a Yid who came. I don't remember the details of it, but he came either for his organization or for himself. I don't know exactly what it was. Nebuch Yid he was very, very sad. He was a wheelchair-bound man, and he was never blind, and he had some limbs amputated. It was pitiful as could be. And he came. Somebody arranged for him to come from Eretz Yisrael to speak in Norris Lee. And after davening in Norris Lee, we were having a fabringen in Kingsley Way. Somebody used the Erev, brought him over by wheelchair to Kingsley Way. And he came to the fabringen. And he said he wants to speak. Of course, we're delighted to hear from him. Nebuch blind, in a wheelchair, lacking limbs, as pitiful as you can imagine. Gave him a chance to speak, and he was quiet. And he started speaking about how lucky he is. Baruch Hashem, we're Yidden, we have an Eibishter, we have Eibishter looks after us. It was just unbelievable to hear this man. Could have had everything in the world to complain about. But he wasn't interested in complaining. He was interested in seeing and being thankful and being grateful to the Eibishter for all the wonderful things that the Eibishter has bestowed upon him and upon all of us. And when you look at things that way, it's a whole different existence. Then the Alter Rebbe continues and he says, in addition to the negative character traits that come from emanate from the Nefesh HaBamis, there are also positive character traits that emanate from the Nefesh HaBamis. Those positive character traits that are natural and instinctive to a Jew from birth. The Nefesh HaLekis is about the service of Hashem, nullifying yourself to Hashem. So there are character traits which you don't have naturally, but you know that this is what is needed for the service of Hashem, so you work on yourself to develop those character traits for the service of Hashem. But there are positive character traits that a Yid has naturally, instinctively. Just like he has negative character traits instinctively, he has positive character traits instinctively. For example, Rachmanis and Gemilas Chasad. It says that the Shloshim Simanim Yesh B'Umazu, there's 3 signs to identify a Jew. There's 3 signs. One is compassion, Rachmanis. Another is Gemilas Chasadim, giving, always happy to share and to give. And the third is Baishanim, bashfulness. Now, the Rebbe here only brings 2. He brings Rachmanis and Gemilas Chasad. And the reason it's brought is because it says that Yidden, in essence, are Azim Shabumas. They're the fiercest of the nations. It's by Matan Torah, the experience of Matan Torah, the overwhelming experience of Matan Torah, caused us to be bashful. But it's not intrinsic in our nature. While compassion and giving, caring for others, this is intrinsic in the nature of a Yid. So those characters which are intrinsic in the nature of a Yid, you're born that way because that's your nature, that's your instinct. So that also comes from the Nefesh HaBamis, because Ki B'Yisrael, because when within the Jewish people, Nefesh Zut Klipa, this soul that comes from Klipa, this animal soul that comes from Klipa, Klipas Noiga, comes from the transparent Klipa. I mentioned in the previous year, you have the fruit and you have the shell. So in a walnut, you have the hard shell, which you have to discard. And you have the soft, transparent shell, which can either be eaten together with the fruit or it can be discarded with the shell. So in the Nimshal also, we mentioned that which is the tachlis of creation, that which is the purpose for which Hashem created the world, which is Yidden and Torah, that's the fruit. That which is not in the purpose of creation, just there in order to put things in the right setting, that's the klipa, that's the shell. But in the shell itself, you have the hard shell, which has to be discarded, like forbidden things, and you have the thinner shell, the transparent membrane around the fruit, which can either be included with the fruit. In other words, it's like the permissible things in the world, which you can either use as a means to serve Hashem better, or sometimes you don't need them, so you discard them together with the hard shell. That's called klipas noig. So since the animal soul of a Jew is not from shalosh klipas atmeis, it's not from the 3 totally impure klipas, or rather it's from klipas noiga, from the transparent klipa, which that one is me'ur of toiv. It's a mixture of good and bad. So just like the bad character traits of a Yid come from that soul, so also the good character traits, which come instinctively and naturally to a Jew, also come from that soul, because this soul is from klipas noiga, which has some good in it as well. This is Kabbalistically to do with the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So the tree of knowledge of good and evil has a combination of good and evil. So Klipas Noiga has a combination of good and evil, and so the animal soul within a Jew, which comes from Klipas Noiga, has a combination of good and evil. And therefore, the character traits which come naturally from the Nefesh HaBamis, most of them are bad character traits, And some of them are also good character traits, but it's good character traits which come instinctively and naturally, not that you're making yourself subservient to Hashem and you're developing those character traits because of your relationship with Hashem, but rather they're natural to every Jew who's born that way, instinctively. Which is not the case with the souls of the nations of the world. They come from the other three klippas, which are completely impure. That have no good in them whatsoever. As explained in Eitz Chaim from the Arizal, Portal 49, chapter 3. What does he say over there? He says, that when we see the nations of the world doing good, which we see on many occasions, we see Gentiles doing good things, but there's always some kind of an ulterior motive behind it. I do it because it makes me feel good. I do it because people will respect me for it. I do it because I will look good. Whatever it is, it's at the end of the day, a human being is a self-centered creature. A human being is a self-centered creature. And when a human being does something, there's a motive. What's the motive? It could vary, even in a refined way. Let's say you can have a situation where a person is at the scene of an accident, and they get involved in helping the victims of the accident. So it could be that the person is saying, I'm very happy that I was just there at this time, so I was able to help them. That would normally be interpreted as a sign of true caring, right? Then you have a situation where what can I do? I happen to be there, and I can't stand the sight of suffering. I can't stand the sight of blood. I can't stand the sight of injury. So I did everything in my ability to prevent myself from having to tolerate watching someone suffer. So at the end of the day, I'm concerned about myself. I'm not so much concerned about the other person. So there is on many levels there could be, and it's not the way it's sometimes understood is that we're putting down Gentiles. That's not what it means. We're not putting down Gentiles. Gentiles are perfectly normal. It's perfectly normal for every human being to be self-centered. That's the way we are. The uftu, the unique difference in the case of a yid who has, first of all, his nefesh habamis, and on top of that, he also has a nefesh halakis, which is completely superior, which is completely devoted to Hashem, to a higher purpose. So there can be something which is beyond the normal of a human being, which is to truly care about another person, either on the level of klipas noiga, where you care about the other person because that's your instinct, or on the level of kedusha, you care about the other person because you're putting yourself aside and you're investing yourself in the other person. As the pasuk says, as the Gemara says on the pasuk, which says the kindness of the nations is a sin. The Gemara says that all charity and kindness that the nations of the world do are only for the purpose of boasting about it afterwards and saying, look how wonderful we are. We've helped this one, we've helped that one, we've done this, we've done that. But it's all, at the end of the day, self-centered. Famous story, let me just conclude with this and then you'll take questions. Famous story, the Alter Rebbe was in prison, and so in the slander that was prepared against the Alter Rebbe when he was in prison, so they stuck in whatever they could, and they also stuck in this piece of Tanya. They figured that the Gentile prosecutors would probably be a bit offended by this, and that could help them. So the Alter Rebbe asked the Alter Rebbe 22 questions, and this was one of the questions. Why does he write in the end of the first chapter of Tanya derogatory things about the Gentiles? So the Alter Rebbe, when it came to each question, the Alter Rebbe answered very clearly in a way that was very satisfactory to the interrogators. Came to this question, Alter Rebbe didn't answer anything, he smiled. And they accepted the smile. They didn't pressure him. The Alter Rebbe later said that what did he mean with the smile? He meant to say like this. He said, you've asked me 21 questions, and I answered you every one of them satisfactorily. Surely you are convinced that if I wanted to answer this question satisfactorily, I could do so as well. But are you sure you want to hear it? wouldn't you be better off leaving things unspoken? That's what he meant with his smile. And he says it seems that they got it because they didn't pressure him into it. What was your question?
We're talking about how,
Before you take questions, I just want to add one more thing. I think it's very important to mention this. There is a concept of Chasidei Umay Sa'ilon. Chasidei Umay Sa'ilon is the pious of the nations of the world. Chasidei Umay Sa'ilon. In halacha, we find that if a Gentile keeps all the Shabbat mitzvahs, all the 7 Noachite laws, and he keeps them because Moshe Rabbeinu was instructed by Hashem in the Torah to keep them, and it's considered from Chasidei Umay Sa'ilon. So the Chasidei Umay Sa'ilon are an exception to this rule. Their nefesh habamis comes from Kupas Noiga. And therefore, this rule that everything, the whole tibud all the good that the nations of the world do is all for selfish reasons, does not apply in the case of Chasidei Umay Sa'ilon, but they're the exception to the rule. Sorry, what's your question?
In a situation where you can it. I mean, if anybody wants to do a shopping center, please, ignore whether you approve of it's the doctor or not. There's 100 times organs like to sign your pets. It's surely that isn't the difference of the doctor. That's something.
Yeah. It's not a pleasant thing to feel you're being bullied about anything. And I think that a person should work out what they're prepared to do and what they're not prepared to do. And if somebody's coming to you from a holy point of view, trying to convince you that the right thing for you would be to do it differently, and you hear what they're saying and you're taking on what they're saying, then I'm fine with that. But just to put pressure on you to do something you're not comfortable with, I don't think that.
That's really quickly. You know,
Yes.
the thing about didn't they wasn't milk?
They were given to Noah. The 6 mitzvahs were given to Adam and Rishon. And then after the flood, Noah was given a 7th mitzvah. But they were again repeated to Moshe Rabbeinu by Matan Torah. And from Matan Torah onward, in order for a Gentile to be performing the mitzvahs, just like we keep the mitzvahs, not because Avraham Avinu circumcised himself, because Moshe Rabbeinu the Torah has commanded us to do what the Torah tells us. So the Gentiles have to keep the 7 mitzvahs because they're a part of the Torah that were given at Sinai to Moshe. Abraham and Achar. Because by the time of Adam and Rishon, they were not allowed to eat animals at all. They were vegetarian. They were given to Noach and to all the descendants of Noach. But it's written in the Torah that they were given to Noach, all the descendants of Noach. And after Matan Torah, there's an obligation to keep the mitzvahs because by the Torah they were given, just like the mitzvah of circumcision, it's the mitzvah to keep the covenant that was made with Abraham, right? So we keep it because the Torah that was given by Moshe Rabbeinu instructs us to keep the covenant that was given to Abraham. It's all part of the Torah, which is from the essence of Hashem. Yeah. The Rambam says that it's an obligation upon the Jewish people to inform the nations of the world of the.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.